Alright, welcome back to the shop. This time we're going to be doing some custom work on my uncle's 96 Ram 2500. It's about to be dark, so I'm not going to get very far on it tonight, but essentially we're going to be trying to replace all the steering components for Rack and Pinion Steering out of a 3rd gen Ram. So going to get rid of the steering box, going to get rid of the idler arm, center link, tie rods on both sides, and replace all of it with a single rack and pinion setup, steering rack setup, out of a 3rd gen Ram. Apparently all of them, 1500, 25, and 3500s, all have the same steering rack. So we're going to try to replace it with that. So I'm not going to get much filming done tonight. That's alright, but I'm going to be doing a little bit of measuring and disassembly on the front end. I don't think I'm going to show very much of that. Maybe I will once it's out, but I need to do some measurements on it first, and then I'm just going to gut all the steering on the front end and clear out some space. Hopefully I can come up with a video here that is informative and detail-oriented enough that other people will be able to repeat this process and get some usefulness out of it. Alright, I'm going to start doing some measuring, and I'll get this taken apart. It's been a couple hours. We have taken all the steering components off the front end. You can see that the knuckles on each side are free of tie rods. There's nothing in the front end. Steering box, center link, tie rods, everything, we removed it as one big piece. So stock, you have the idler arm, center link, and the steering gearbox. This truck, he does have an aftermarket like brace, as well as it's like a stabilizer, has a bearing and all that holds the bottom of the pitman arm. Other tie rods. So we took the entire assembly out as one piece. We may put this back in because this also holds in where the sway bar goes. But everything's out of the truck. So next we're going to start trying to mock up and test fit a steering rack off of a 3rd gen Ram. 3rd gen 1500s are 2002 through 2008, I think. 3rd gen 2500s up are like 2003 through 2009. All the 2-wheel drives have the same steering rack, and this only is going to work on 2-wheel drive Dodges. 4-wheel drive, you need a different setup. So I'm trying to make this pretty comprehensive so everything makes sense. Alright, here's a side-by-side comparison of the two different pieces. So of course that's, the steering box assembly we took out of the truck. And this is a steering rack out of a 2004 Ram 1500 2-wheel drive. V6, V8, doesn't matter. Like I said before, same steering rack on all the Ram 1500 through 3500 2-wheel drives. Same rack. So it's got the tie rods on it. From everything I've read online, tie rods will fit on both ends. Pressure line will fit. Low pressure line will also fit. The only thing you got to do is do a little bit of finagling and clearancing to get steering shafts to assemble and connect here. I believe we might be taking this one off, but I'm not going to say that for a fact just yet. So I'm probably going to pick this up again in the morning. It's getting pretty dark out, or it is dark out. But we're going to go ahead and get this under the truck tomorrow morning and start doing some mock-up and see what we can do to get it in there. Alright, it's another day out here. Got the steering rack sitting out here. Cleaned it up a little bit last night. Found center on the shaft, but that's not super important at the moment. Either way, I did some measuring underneath the truck. And using the paint pen, I found center line, and it needs to be 11 5/8 center to center on the eyelets. So I measured each way 5 13/16 from the center. So there to there is 11 5/8. And I just did some marking up and down and giving myself I took a guesstimate basically off the bottom of the pan versus how much vertical height I had with the hoses and stuff. And just kind of came down, marked it across, that's what the long line is, and then started test fitting it. And you can look through the eyes on the mounts and line them up to that crosshair, the lower one, and checking that, you're checking steering shaft clearance up there at the motor mount, and I thought I could come up another 1/4 inch. So I've actually got a 1/4 inch mark and then another 1/2 inch above it. So that's what those 3 marks are: original, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch at the top. So I've got it marked. I think we're going to go with the 1/4 inch one. We like it. It feels pretty good for clearance without getting too terribly close to the oil pan.
We're probably just going to go ahead and run a pilot where that 1/4 inch mark is. I've been checking everything with the level gauge, the angle finder, to confirm everything's flat to the bottom of the truck in the same plane. So we like where it's at for now. We're just going to go ahead and drill them. This is a up to you portion of your job. If you do this, getting it in a placement that you like is up to you. Between getting it leveled and centered is one portion, and then the other is how far out do we mount the steering rack from that cross member. So for now, that's where we're choosing to put it. I'll try to get some better measurements on it in a little bit.
Alright, this is not the greatest of angles. I barely got it clamped up in here. We're kind of holding it up. But you can kind of see my paint marks through the hole in there. And it's about the same here. It's probably a little low. But you can see you got a little bit of clearance at the top, probably a 1/2 inch or so. It needs to come up on the side as well, so it'll lessen. But it's kind of in here. Shaft goes up through there. You're probably going to have to make some adjustments to that motor mount right there, because I think they're going to be making contact. It's not now, but it probably will when we mount it down. So that's a pretty close approximation. We like where the marks are. Everything looks like it's going to fit pretty good, so I think we're going to go ahead and at least pilot hole and start drilling out the 2 marks on the frame. Alright, I've got pilot holes drilled here and down here. And just to give you kind of a quick rough frame of reference, if you bump to the bottom of the oil pan, you're 3.5 inches down. And that's with holding the tape measure flat here and just bumping into the pan. 3.5 on this side. This side, if you're bumping into the bolts holding the bottom of the pan on, it's about 5 7/16. If you hook to this arm where the bolt for the A-arm is and you measure in, it's about right at 6 inches in. Same on both sides because it's centered. I already said before, if you're measuring from one to the other, 11 5/8 between the holes. So that's split with this being the center. That's where we put ours. We did our best to just transfer the hole to the back side just by measuring. It doesn't have to be as perfect on the back side. As long as the bolts are in the correct location coming from this side, it should be good. Back side could have a little bit of, bolt misalignment, but it isn't going to affect this side. So I think that's where we're going to leave it. The next thing we're going to work on doing is drilling out with this hole saw. It's an 1 1/8. We have a 5/8 ID, 1 1/8 OD tube we're going to slip into these holes. So we're going to go ahead and hole saw these out. Looks pretty good. You can see through the hole. You can see to the pilot in the back. It looks to be pretty well in line. At least in line enough for our needs. So that is a Milwaukee brand hole saw on I think Irwin brand arbor, and it worked really well. Alright. Got holes drilled on the front. And we didn't record it, but we plasma cut the holes in the back. Here's the passenger side one, right in the center of the screen. We did confirm that the pipe will slip all the way through it. So the next thing up is going to be cutting that pipe to length. Here's that pipe I was talking about. It's kind of a thicker wall, 5/8 inside, 1 1/8 outside. And when we measured everything at the beginning, the cross member that we're going through in the front of the truck is 5.5 inches front to rear. So I'm going to cut it at 6 1/4. That will give me about, you know, 1/2 inch or so sticking out the face, about 1/4 inch sticking out the back to weld either end to. So I think that'll be sufficient. I don't think I'll need any more or less than that. So that's where I'm going to cut it. So got it marked 6 1/4. Going to go ahead and cut this twice and get 2 pieces that match. Alright, I've now got these 2 slugs cut to 6 1/4 inches. And I plasma cut it on the back as I've already shown. I can slip these in and they'll go all the way through. A little finicky to get through, but they'll do it. There we go. Right there we go. So I got them in. For now, I'm going to set them out 1/4 inch from this face. It kind of tapers off on the ends. Kind of tapers off a little bit, but from this face I'm going to try to do 1/4 inch and I'll tack them in place. I'm also going to take a flat edge, some sort of straight edge, and check that they are indeed equal and flat across versus the bottom of this frame. So if I set my little angle finder back on the bottom, down there, 0, it's already on 0, 0, and I set this to the bottom of this, 0.3 of a degree off. This end is a little low, so I may be able to just push down a hair on this end and make up for that, but I think that's pretty close. We're going to go ahead and tack these in place and do a little test fitment of the rack. We need longer bolts, so we got some 5/8 all thread. And we welded a 3/4 inch nut on the end, so it'd just be bigger. So these are going to be our bolts. So we're fixing to do a quick test fit. Alright, as you saw, we got it kind of put up in there. This side does really well. It actually pushes all the way to that 1/4 inch stick out. But this side does not. And the reason being is, where I showed before, it is bumping into the lip of that motor mount up there, and it's preventing us from sliding back like another 1/2 inch we need to even touch that spacer. So, can't quite make it happen. So we're going to pull this back off and see what we can do about that motor mount, see if we can clearance it a little bit. We may have to bump this out to a 1/2 inch to give us a little more room. We'll see what happens. This is a test fit, trial and error kind of thing. Alright, post-welding update. We ended up sticking out these tubes about 9/16 of an inch. Welded them in there. Look good. As far as clearancing for the motor mount, there's a little triangle piece that goes from here across to here. Just took a Sawzall, kind of cut those out. And there's a bent over lip that starts here and it kind of bends out and goes over to about here. I don't think any of this is enough to hurt this engine. He doesn't drag race with it. He doesn't sled pull. It is a 12 valve Cummins, but it's heavy, but I don't think it's going to hurt that bracket at all. So we just kind of nip the corners. We'll hit everything with black coat of paint here in a second, especially down here. There's a lot of fresh weld. But we found that 9/16 out here, everything's clearing. Steering shaft clears up through there, and everything looks pretty good. Back side of the weld, it's alright. Nothing to write home about. So, I think we're going to get a coat of paint on it. We won't show that. Get a coat of paint on it so it can start drying. We're going to work on trying to figure out the steering shaft next. Alright, quick update. We've got the rack bolted into the truck and we're working on the steering shaft assembly. This end went to the steering column, where the steering wheel is, and this end went to the old power steering gearbox. This shaft assembly is too long to accommodate this assembly, which came off of the rack. The rack had this assembly on it. We do need this tall piece to get us up high enough vertically to get past the motor mount, but we need to somehow get this all to connect together, and we need to lose some length. So the plan currently has been press apart this U-joint assembly here, and we're going to see if we can assemble this one onto, onto this end. Try to replace these. It looks like everything will work perfect. The only thing we'd have left to do is find a way to shorten this shaft setup. So we're getting there. We're going to see what we can do. Getting these pressed apart is the first step, and we already got one half stuck in it. Alright, quick update. We destroyed a few U-joint caps, but we actually got it together. So we've got the long end off of a 3rd gen RAM mated to the end of a 96-2500 2nd gen RAM. U-joint caps fit, just pressed them all apart. Like I said, we destroyed a couple. A couple of them got pressed into each other and just wouldn't come out, but once you get it apart, sand it, clean it, grease everything, looks to be working fine. So we're pretty confident in that. We do need to figure out how to shorten that. So I think the next thing we're going to do is see about this stake. It looks like there's a stake in here that's preventing this inner shaft from sliding out like that. So we're going to see about maybe cutting around this and seeing if we can get the shaft out. If that's possible, we may just shorten the shaft a little bit, shorten this a little bit, put it all back together and restake it, but we'll see what happens. So we'll get it apart, or at least make a cut, and I'll update you. Alright, I cut around this about a ½ inch back, took a chisel, knocked it out until it came apart, and the shaft does disassemble. So now we can use this shaft as a reference for length. We can cut a little bit off the end down there, tip of my finger, and cut some off the end here, and we could actually make this thing as short as we want. So we can do a little bit of trial and error in the truck and make sure that this is going to work. So there we go. Alright, picking up on another day. I'll show you what I did for the steering shaft. Didn't record it all because it took a while to figure out what I was doing. This portion of the shaft from here to here was original out of the 96-2500. So this is what came out. This end was originally in there. This wasn't. The rack had this connected to the rack end with this piece on this side. So you can see that I basically pushed all the U-joint caps out and swapped the long end onto this piece. The next problem is we needed to reduce the overall length of the entire thing. So there's this portion here that has a flat in it. And it used to have like 6 more inches of round tube at the end here. We pressed it in there. It's got rubber. You press it in, knock the pin out of it, and cut it off, re-drilled a new hole, put it back in, put a bolt through it. And then we cut about an inch off of this inner shaft, and of course we had that ½ inch we cut that I previously showed in order to get this out, you know, where the stake was. I hope that makes some sense. We've also tested it in the truck and confirmed which orientation we needed in. A little bit of flip-flopping to get the steering wheel straight and get the rack and pinion in the straight alignment. But we've got it now. We had it 180 out. We can just slide this out, flip it over, and slide it back in. So hopefully that makes some sense. I think some other people online did a 3rd gen intermediate shaft, but of course we did this off the 2nd gen shaft with the 3rd gen, what do you want to call this, stub shaft here at the base of the rack. So I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. Any further explanation needed, just ask for it in the comments, I guess. But we're going to go ahead and throw this back in and show you what else we got done.
Alright, I just showed you guys what I did for the steering shaft and got it bolted back in there. The only other things we did was replace the stock power steering lines. One of them down there, you can see the tag on it right there in the center screen. Replace the high power, high pressure line. And then for the return line, I don't think we covered this yet, you use the output fitting, which is larger diameter than this old 2nd gen stuff. That came off the rack for the 3rd gen, and you got 5/8 hose to it. And you're going to use a 5/8 to 3/8 hose bib adapter. Gets you up to the 3/8 line, which is what fits the stock power steering return on this 2nd gen stuff. Everything's mounted under here. We did our best to just do a quick alignment. We've already test drove it a couple times. It is a huge improvement. It steers tighter. We think we got it down to under 2 turns from under 3 turns, excuse me, from lock to lock, like 2.5 to 2 3/4, somewhere around there. It steers in tighter. Our steering radius might have improved a little bit. We're not sure on that, but it definitely tracks better down the road. And it hasn't even been properly aligned yet, so we went through, checked all the bolts. Everything looks good. No leaks that we can find. So I think that about sums it up. Weld a couple slugs into the frame, bolt it to the frame, readjust your steering line, adapt that return line for the power steering, and you can use the stock high pressure line. And everything goes together. So I'm pretty happy with this, how this turned out. I think my uncle's going to be happy driving this around. If I have any problems or anything goes wrong, or if I have to make any repairs, I'll do another update video, but I think that's going to conclude the work on this one. Let him drive this thing off and enjoy it. Alright, stay tuned for the next video.